Malcolm X, born Malcolm Little on May 19, 1925, in Omaha, Nebraska, was a pivotal figure in the American Civil Rights Movement. His journey from a troubled youth to a powerful advocate for Black empowerment, self-defense, and racial justice made him one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century. Malcolm was the fourth of 8 children. His father, Earl Little, was a Baptist minister and a strong supporter of Marcus Garvey's movement for Black nationalism. His activism made him a target of white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, leading to threats, violence, and ultimately, his suspicious death in 1931. Malcolm's mother, Louise Little, struggled financially and emotionally after Earl's death, and the family was eventually separated by child welfare services. Malcolm was an intelligent student, but systemic racism shaped his path early on. A teacher's comment that he should become a carpenter rather than a lawyer discouraged him from pursuing formal education. He dropped out of school and moved to Boston and later Harlem, where he got involved in petty crimes, gambling, and drug dealing. In 1946, he was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison for burglary. While in prison, Malcolm educated himself, reading extensively and developing critical thinking skills. He was introduced to the Nation of Islam, NOI, through his siblings, who followed the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. The NOI preached Black self-reliance, separation from white society, and a rejection of racial integration efforts. Malcolm became deeply devoted to this ideology, renounced his last name, which he considered a slave name, and replaced it with X to symbolize his lost African heritage. Upon his release in 1952, he joined the Nation of Islam as a minister, and quickly rose in prominence. He established new temples, recruited thousands of members, and became the national spokesman for the movement. His charisma and fiery speeches gained national attention, often challenging the nonviolent philosophy of Martin Luther King Jr.
Are you not perhaps afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
What do you mean?
When you understand the makeup of the Muslim movement and the psychology of the Muslim movement, as long as if I myself, by having confidence in the leader of the Muslim movement, if someone came to me and I had no knowledge whatsoever of what had taken place and they told me what I'm saying, I would kill them myself. The only thing that would prevent me from killing someone who made a statement like this, they would have to be able to let me know that it's true. Now, if anyone had come to me other than Mr. Muhammad's son, I never would have believed it, even enough to look into it. But I had been around him so closely, I had seen indications of the reality of it, but my religious sincerity made me block it out of my mind.
Have you received threats on your life?
Oh, yes.
Commit murder?
Well, I couldn't say and wouldn't say. I can answer you like this.
Well, what now for Malcolm X? You announced when you left the Black Muslims that you were organizing a politically oriented Black nationalist party, but we've heard very little of that party, and here we are well along into June of an election year.
Yes, immediately I saw the need for a base. And so, since I am a Muslim, and I knew that I could never stand up in public and represent Mr. Muhammad anymore, and at the same time I didn't at that time want to say why I couldn't represent him, I knew, as his son told me, Wallace Muhammad, that the only salvation for the Muslims, they would have to turn toward the Orthodox religion of Islam. And it was Mr. Muhammad's son, Wallace Muhammad, who encouraged me to make the pilgrimage to Mecca and get myself orientated into the knowledge of the Orthodox religion of Islam. And at the same time, since I was a nationalist, I had to have a better knowledge of what the attitude of Africans was toward our people in this country, so I made a tour through the African nations. After going into the Muslim world and into the African nations, finding what their attitude was toward the problem of the American Negro, I have now come back, and we are in the process of setting up an organization for that purpose.
One question before we go further with that. Has Wallace Muhammad left the Black Muslims?
Wallace Muhammad was put out of the Muslim movement right along with me.
Now then, your Black Nationalist Party.
It's not a Black Nationalist Party.
Oh, what is it?
Our political, economic, and social philosophy is Black nationalism.
How many members do you have?
At the present time, we have no members.
How many members do the Muslims have?
I have no idea.
You really
but
don't?
I do know that during the past 4 years, there has been more of a dropping away than there has been more decrease than increase. And most of those who have left have been the younger ones, the ones who want some action, and the ones who want to participate in the entire overall struggle of the black man in this country for his rights.
How many Muslims followed you out of the movement?
I have no idea.
How many did the Muslims have at their height?
I have no idea. When I watched your program years ago, I think you come pretty close to it when you said about 250,000. The following is not always an active, registered following. But
Where does your financing come from now?
right now, I have no financing. The only financing we have are the Muslims who are still with me.
Well, how do you support yourself,
Well,
Malcolm?
I'm unsupported.
Well, you seem to be fairly well fed
Well,
and well.
fortunately, while I was among the Muslims, I never lived beyond my means, and I have learned how to live within means. And I still have the clothes that that was provided for me at that time. I'm in the house that was provided for me, although we're in a court battle. They're trying to get it back. And I have made this statement to them concerning the house, that they could have it. If they would take me back, that they would permit me to come before the Muslim movement, the rank and file, and explain or defend myself against all of the charges that they've made against me, they could have the house. But they are going contrary to their own laws by standing up in the mosque and indicting me, but never giving me a chance to defend myself. And they say that no one can judge me but Mr. Muhammad. In this case, Mr. Muhammad can't sit as judge because he's involved in the case.
Elijah Muhammad says of the Muslims, we carry no arms, and we do not seek to win victory with arms. We do nothing to others that we would not have done unto us.
The two brothers were sent after me with revolvers by Joseph, the captain of the Fruit in New York. They were armed. When a Muslim is attacked, and you'll find this to be the pattern, when the Muslims were attacked in Monroe, Louisiana, Elijah Muhammad gave no signal to anybody across the nation to come to the defense of their brothers. When our brothers were attacked in Los Angeles, again, Elijah Muhammad gave no signal to anybody to come to the defense of those brothers. Never have the Muslims anywhere in the country gotten any kind of instruction from the national office or headquarters on how to defend themselves when they are attacked by outsiders. The only times the Muslims have ever been given any instructions to commit violence is when that violence is directed against a fellow Muslim.
As far as you are concerned, you will accept the fealty, if you will, of any Negro anywhere under any conditions.
You have to define fealty.
You want them to give you their loyalty.
Not me, their loyalty. I'm not seeking for the loyalty of any Negro, but I am seeking that for Negroes to learn how to be loyal to themselves. And when the Negro learns how to be loyal to himself, our problem is pretty well solved.
Cut just a second.
One brother encouraged to go out to my house and shut me up. And fortunately, it was a brother who was well capable of doing so, but it was a brother who was highly intelligent. He was academically equipped to think for himself. And what he was told to do didn't add up. And fortunately, he was the one who put out a feeler to me to find out what was wrong. And I opened his eyes. And then he opened the eyes of the same crew whose job it is to do this kind of work.
You mean he was going to kill you?
Oh, yes. One of them was, an attempt was made to get one of them to wire my car with an explosive. That one is with me right now.
Minister Malcolm, when you broke with Elijah Muhammad back in March, you said it was because the black Muslims were too narrowly sectarian and inhibited, and because Elijah Muhammad had become blindly jealous of you and the personal following that you had gathered.
I never said that Mr. Muhammad was jealous. Every statement that I made was designed to protect him and to protect his image. I said that his officials and his family there in Chicago were the ones who were jealous. And I only tried to protect his image because it was his image that enabled his followers to have such strong faith and exercise the moral discipline that they displayed. And as long as I thought that the Muslim movement represented a force that could reform the morals of the Negro community, I could represent it as such. But we had a strong law which dictated that any Muslim who became involved in any kind of sexual activity with anyone to whom they weren't married, they were brought before the Muslim community and humiliated and then isolated or sentenced out of the Muslim community for from 1 to 5 years. Well, in 1954, a teenage sister left Detroit and became one of Mr. Muhammad's personal secretaries. And there in the Chicago office, she became pregnant after being there for a year. And she was brought before the Muslim community and humiliated and isolated. And a year later, another secretary, this time one from Lansing, Michigan, came to Chicago. She also became pregnant. She was brought before the community and humiliated and isolated. And because the other person was never brought forth during this court session, it was concluded by all of Mr. Muhammad's followers that it was a non-Muslim who was the other party. Well, we grew so rapidly until that in 1957 or 58, the secretarial staff was expanded to, I think, 8 teenage sisters. In 1959, 6 of them disappeared. 2 of them reappeared in Philadelphia about 2 or 3 months later, and they were all right. The other 4 reappeared in 1960. All 4 of them had babies. All 4 of them had become involved with someone and become pregnant and had these children. So it was, from what I now know, when the 4 of them got back to Chicago and began to compare notes, they found that the same man had told all of them the same story and had made all of them pregnant, that the same man was the father of all 4 of their children and had also been the father of the children brought forth by the 2 secretaries who preceded them. So this story was kept among these sisters until 1962. 2 of them rebelled against the person who was responsible and began to tell the story all over the city of Chicago. It caused many of the Muslims in the Chicago mosque to leave and go back out in the street. They knew it, and I knew nothing about it until 1963 when Mr. Muhammad's son, who had been in prison, came out, and he had been a minister, and he was very religious and spiritual. And when he began to hear these rumors around Chicago, he went to one of the sisters, and the sister admitted to him that the rumor was true. And it was he who first told me about it. And when he told me about it, I wrote to Mr. Muhammad and told him about it, and he admitted that he had a knowledge of it, and that he'd given me a religious explanation that would fit into prophecy and all of that. So I was quiet. And it wasn't until October of 1963 that it came up again. And when it came up again, I realized that the same person who had made these other sisters pregnant was still busy doing the same thing. He hadn't stopped. 2 of the sisters had 2 children by the same man. And one of those 2 sisters was pregnant still, getting ready to have a 3rd child by the same. I had a knowledge of this. They become very fearful of me. They became very antagonistic toward me, and they had to do something to diminish the authority that I had, for fear that if this became public knowledge, the followers would leave the Muslim movement and follow me. And it was at that time that they used the statement that I made against President Kennedy as a pretext to cut my authority, and some other things happened that finally produced the split, or forced the split. And when I made the split, the only reason that I didn't make this public knowledge was I knew the implications, and I felt that if the Muslims who were in the Nation of Islam knew it, that which enabled them to be so strongly religious and exercise moral discipline would be shattered, and it would cause all of them to go right back and start doing the things that they had been doing previously.
Who is the father of all of these various children whom you have enumerated?
The first one to tell me who the father was Wallace Muhammad, and he told me that the father was Elijah Muhammad himself. One of the sisters, he went to the home of one of the sisters, and when he walked in the door, she says, "I want to let you see something." And she showed him her child. She said, "Here's your brother, and your father is the father of this child." And then I questioned the sisters myself, because I was shook up. And they admitted to me that Elijah Muhammad was the father of their children. And I took it to him. And it was at that time he told me that he was Muhammad, the prophet, and that Muhammad had 9 wives. He also told me that he was David. He was the modern David, and that he was the modern Solomon, and that it was meant for him to fulfill today all of the things that they did back there.
And how many of these illegitimate children did he father with the sisters?
Well, he made 6 sisters pregnant. They all had children. 2 of those 6 had 2 children. One of those 2 is having a child right now. I am told that there is a seventh in any area where they are being attacked. They should, if they are intelligent, they should try and protect themselves.
On February 21st, 1965, while preparing to address an audience at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, Malcolm X was assassinated by 3 gunmen affiliated with the Nation of Islam. He was just 39 years old. His wife, Betty Shabazz, and their 6 daughters carried on his legacy. Tomorrow, February 21st, 2025, marks the 60th anniversary of the assassination of the great and honorable Malcolm X, also known as El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. We come together to celebrate and honor his life, legacy, and the lasting impact he has had on the fight for racial justice, Black empowerment, and human rights. Malcolm X was a fearless leader who dedicated his life to uplifting Black people, challenging oppression, and advocating for self-determination. From his early years in the Nation of Islam to his transformation into a global human rights activist, his journey was one of growth, resilience, and unwavering commitment to truth and justice. Though he was taken from us on February 21st, 1965, his words and teachings remain as powerful as ever. His message of strength, unity, and liberation continues to inspire generations around the world. As we commemorate 60 years since his passing, let us reflect on his contributions, spread his teachings, and continue the fight for equality and justice in his honor. Rest in power, Malcolm X.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Well, I didn't see any racism. I didn't see any conflict between the people over there because of the colors of their skin or the differences in color of skin. And in every country that I entered, there were Muslims who were black, brown, red, yellow, and white. And there was no racist attitude in any of them. Then when I was in Arabia during the pilgrimage, I had many different occasions when I would be involved with persons who would be considered white in America, who would be called white. They had blue eyes, blonde hair, and white skin. Yet they themselves didn't act like American whites act toward non-whites. There was a bond, a mutual understanding. There was an attitude of brotherhood practiced at all times. I analyzed it, or I should say, at least I studied it, because here in America, our experience always was, it was almost impossible to find whites who didn't act white, especially around non-whites. So the conclusion that I reached was that these people who had accepted the religion of Islam, who had accepted the existence of one God, automatically the chain reaction effect that this has, they would also have to accept the fact that everybody belongs to one family, one human family. So by accepting the oneness of God and the oneness of the human family, I believe the tendency to look upon each other according to the differences in color automatically was eliminated. Since they didn't regard themselves as white per se, as the American white man does, they didn't act white. They acted like humans. They acted like they were part of the human family and all others present were part of the human family. Now this was the first experience, or the first time that I had ever experienced this. And as I wrote to some friends, if the religion of Islam could eliminate racism from among the societies that exist in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Arabia, then it would do well for the American white man to expose himself to get to a better understanding of the religion of Islam, and perhaps it can remove some of the racism, which is like a cancer that is destroying the American society today. And the only thing that ever gave me the impression that there was any hope of eliminating racism
For president tells Negroes what he's going to do for them when he gets in office, and after he gets in office, he has time to do something for everybody else except the people that put him in office. He tricked the people who put him in office. He has the time to take a stand against U.S. Steel, against Castro, against Khrushchev, against Laos and South Vietnam and all these other places all over the world. But when it comes to time to correcting the injustices that are being inflicted against Negroes in this country, Kennedy sits up there like Nero. He's fiddling while Birmingham is burning.
Are you anti-Semitic?
Anti-Semitic.
You've many of the things that I've read about you, and you've made a mention a couple of times about the Jews and everything, and I'm wondering if you are personally anti-Semitic.
No. How can I be anti-Semitic when the Arabs are half the Muslim world is Semitic? If I was anti-Semitic, I'd be anti-Arab and anti-everything else. No, I think that in this country, there's one mistake that the Jews make. They put themselves in a position where whenever anybody gives an objective analysis of the role that they play, they defend themselves by accusing you of being anti-Semitic.
In the United Nations, you have poor nations and rich nations. They say that the most powerful bloc in the UN is the African Asian bloc. These are the poor nations. Yet they carry more weight in this political body than the nations do who have all the money. Why? Because no matter how wealthy America is, she only has one vote. No matter how wealthy Russia is, she only has one vote. Whereas all the poor nations in Africa who have just emerged into independence, they have each a vote too. And they stick together and are able to outmaneuver the rich nations. This is by having independence and the right to vote in the political world body. It has enabled the dark nations to band together and use the strength of their ballot to force the wealthy nations, which are the white nations, into giving more independence to other nations who are still under their jurisdiction. You and I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet.
Don't scare Negroes today with no badge or no white skin or no white sheet or no white anything else. The police the same way. They put their club upside your head and then turn around and accuse you of attacking them. Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side other than what the white man chooses to give him? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this, and it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves. They attack the victim, and then the criminal who attacked the victim accuses the victim of attacking him. This is American justice. This is American democracy. And those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Now, if I'm wrong, put me in jail. But if you can't prove that a democracy is not hypocrisy, then don't put your hands on me.
For example, many Zionists maintain they could never expect justice in the Tsarist courts and the courts found in other countries in Eastern Europe and so on. And they decided that it would be wise to establish a separate state in Israel.
And all of the world powers got together, the white world powers, I should say, got together and helped all of these white Jews to establish a separate state in the heart of a dark-skinned people's territory. And if white people can get together and let other whites, help other whites to establish an independent nation right in the midst of dark-skinned people, and then we don't see where white people should be so much against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's solution, not of setting up an independent dark nation in a white people's property, but he's asking the opportunity to set up an independent nation on our own continent. Let us leave America and go back home among our own people on our own land and set up our own independent society. But all he says is that this government, which made us slaves, should supply the transportation for us to get back home and give us all of the machinery and the tools necessary for us to till the soil and establish our own agricultural system to feed and clothe our people, our own economy, and in some way become an independent people among our own people on our own continent. This is intelligent.
You are more dangerous sober than you are drunk. He's not worrying about no dancing, singing, clowning Negro. He's worried about you when you stop dancing, when you stop singing, when you stop clowning and start thinking. Then he gets worried. And you should keep him worried.
I pray that God will bless you in everything that you do. I pray that you will grow intellectually so that you can understand the problems of the world and where you fit into in that world picture. And I pray that all the fear that has ever been in your heart will be taken out. And when you look at that man, if you know he's nothing but a coward, you won't fear him. If he wasn't a coward, he wouldn't gang up on you. He wouldn't need to sneak around there. This is how they function. They function in mobs. That's a coward. They put on a sheet so you won't know who they are. That's a coward. No. The time will come when that sheet will be ripped off. If the federal government doesn't take it off, we'll take it off. Anytime you have to pass a civil rights bill to make voter registration or voting opportunities increase for black people in this country, that in itself is a slap at the entire system of democracy. The only thing that will affect voter registration is when our own leaders form some kind of political education program that makes our people become more politically mature, politically alert, and aware of what their involvement and participation in politics will bring them. So it's not so much voter registration without voter education is a waste of time. Legislation will do neither. Anytime you live in a society supposedly based upon law, and it doesn't enforce its own law because the color of a man's skin happens to be wrong, then I say those people are justified to resort to any means necessary to bring about justice where the government can't give them justice. But when a black man strikes back, he's an extremist. He's supposed to sit passively and have no feelings, be nonviolent, and love his enemy. No matter what kind of attack, be it verbal or otherwise, he's supposed to take it. But if he stands up and in any way tries to defend himself, then he's an extremist.
The police are able to use the press to make the white public think that 90% or 99% of the Negroes in the Negro community are criminals. And once the white public is convinced that most of the Negro community is a criminal element, then this automatically paves the way for the police to move into the Negro community, exercising Gestapo tactics, stopping any black man who is on the sidewalk, whether he is guilty or whether he is innocent, whether he is well dressed or whether he is poorly dressed, whether he is educated or whether he is dumb, whether he's a Christian or whether he's a Muslim. As long as he is black and a member of the Negro community, the white public thinks that the white policeman is justified in going in there and trampling on that man's civil rights and on that man's human rights.
No. If they don't pass it, it'll make him angry, and if they do pass it, it'll make him angry, because most of the trouble that you're having in this country right now is in the North rather than in the South. And I think that any person who has a knowledge of the Civil Rights Bill will agree that it offers the Negro in the North nothing that he doesn't already have. So if that bill is passed and it still doesn't offer the Northern Negro anything that he has, it means that the present civil rights legislation won't in any way correct the problems that Negroes in the North are facing. So after the bill is passed, the Negro will still be living in the ghetto. He'll still be the unemployed. He'll still be the victim of poor education and poor everything else.
I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong, than the one who comes up like an angel and is nothing but a devil.
Aborigines, which means what? Black folks. But you never find a white aborigine. Rather, aborigines are called natives, or they're always dark-skinned people. You and I are aborigines. But you don't like to be called an aborigine. You want to be called an American. Aborigine actually means from the beginning. It's two Latin words. Ab meaning from, origine meaning the beginning.